Hello, you're very welcome to AFI Weekly here on the Under Centre podcast. Dara here with you, joined by Alex Sims as usual. I'm delighted to welcome back from his brief hiatus, retirement, whatever he's deciding from week to week. It's Fionn Malloy. How are you, buddy?
Good. Yeah, a bit of just some schedules clashing. We're trying to work some stuff out. When you're in high demand, I think we all know every time we go missing, Dara, it's just a way to leverage a bit more money out of you because you're dishing out the big bucks these days. So I just wanted to make sure I got my cut as well.
I don't know where you think I'm getting these big books. I don't have any big or books.
Well, you're big, all right.
Away from the poorhouse.
Maybe books is the bit that's missing.
Yeah, well, look, listen, that's one thing that definitely hasn't changed me since the last time you saw me. It's definitely still big.
No bucks on this show, but there might be a couple of stags.
Well, from the reports that I heard, I don't think they even had stags for games at the weekend. So I think we're missing a few. Before we get into it, Alex, I have to ask you as well, because there's been a bit of a change to life at the Mavericks this season. And I'm not just talking about your new head coach. I'm talking about the fact that you are no longer on the side of the hill pitch that you used to be down in Dundalk. You are now been moved over to the prime real estate of the main rugby pitch this year. What's the story there?
Yeah, we're on the first pitch. The pitch that we're usually on has been renovated and reseeded, so it's a bit of a construction site at the minute. So yeah, we're getting the luxury of the first pitch, but only for the month of May. But thankfully, we have three games in May, and then that pitch has been reseeded. So if we do end up having a home semi-final, it will have to be in another location, like our first game was. So yeah, look.
Exclusive breaking news here on the show. That's what it is.
That's it. The joys of the logistics. The best thing is that I'm not on the board this year, so none of it's my problem. I'll show up wherever they tell me the games I played.
Nice neutral value like at loan or something like that.
I was about to say where it's a good time to not be on the board for sure with logistics issues like that. If you want, I know a place around Blanchardstown that'll be willing to host a playoff game if you are in so need of it.
Well, look, we'll see how it works out. Hopefully, we'll get somewhere local and we'll still be able to, have the few fans there that generally come to our games. So we're keeping an eye in an ear out. But if anyone owns a ground in and around the Louth area, give me a shout and I'll pass you into someone who.
Where was the old Bulldogs home ground? Was it Athy, wasn't it?
At the Boy.
At Boy, that's where it was. At Boy. That can't be too far of a drive away for you.
I think it's still about an hour, I think. It was from us. Navan would probably be handy, or somewhere like Navan or Slane. But we hate Meath, so not really a runner.
That's fair enough. I guess that's not going to work. So it's going to. Well, look, listen. If you can get chatting with Dundalk Football Club, maybe in Oriel Park is a special one-off.
I don't need it much these days.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be a great spot. All right.
We have 5 games to look at this week. 4 of them shutouts, including yourself, Alex, which we will get into. We have the biggest game of the season so far to look at as well in the UCD and the Trojans. And then I kind of want to give a broader question at the end of our review about the season so far and what you've thought of. We're over halfway at this stage, so it'd be good to get your thoughts on that. And Fionn, especially now with yourself being an outsider looking in, not being associated with a team, I'd love to get your perspective on it too. And of course, we'll look ahead to the 4 games we have this coming bank holiday weekend. Some playoff clinching scenarios in both divisions. And once again, Alex is going to be in action at home in that Tier 1 pitch in Dundalk too, so which we'll get into. But let's get straight into the reviews, and we'll talk about the game on Saturday in the Premier Division. That, of course, was the UCD and the Belfast Trojans. Trojans came down and took the W back to Belfast with them in what a lot are saying is the sort of, a prelude to the Shamrock Bowl this year. Of course, the Trojans now go to 6-0. I keep saying they UCD. UCD are now 4-1. Just the scoring side of things for us on the UCD, it was Tom McAnuff rushing touchdown and a Hugh O'Connor fumble recovery for a touchdown. On the Trojan side of things, they went up 22-0 at halftime through rushing touchdowns, from 2 from Rayshawn Boswell and 1 from Mo Ramadan. Then late in the fourth quarter, to stop any hopes of UCD comeback, Don Linton threw to Ben Haim for a passing touchdown to make it 29-12. Also, Thomas Boyd, Brandon Falconer, and Chris Hill had interceptions on the day too. Lads, I want to get your point of view on the game. It's interesting. When I spoke to Reen about this last week, looking ahead to the game. I asked him about what sort of condition would you rather be in coming into this game, because both sides were on different spectrums. So the Trojans have been coming off, I think, 2 or 3 games in the last 4 weeks. UCD have just had a 3 or 4 week break due to exams and stuff like that. And I asked him, which side would you have rather been on? And I think we both kind of agreed that the Trojans were coming into it in the better scenario, having game reps and stuff, and being more ready for it. And you can sort of see in the film with UCD that you could see that maybe they were off. A few of the things on offense were off. The connections weren't there as they were previously, probably down to the break. What they weren't able to keep that momentum going through the games, possibly, and just a little sloppier than it would have been if they had been playing even one game a week or 2 before that. But what do you guys think? I'll start with you, Alex, on this one.
Yeah, I would have to agree with yourself and Rian on that. It's hard coming off that kind of a long layoff and getting straight into a game. You're going to be a little bit, a little bit less fluid on offense, especially. So it wasn't not a huge surprise that they were a little bit off in the passing game. I did think they'd sort of pick it up as the game went on and as it progressed into the second half. But they just didn't really get it. They only had one drive that ended in a score, with the other touchdown being a defensive score. Like, that is just not something you expect to see from a UCD. Just, turnovers, turning the ball over and downs, even going 3 and out. Like, just not the stuff we've expected from this sort of elite unit. It's not the end of the world. Like, this loss in the grand scheme of things isn't really gonna have too much bearing on the end of the season. I don't think when they play, if these 2 teams do play again in July in Athlone, I think we'll see a much different game. But yeah, I think that break is unquestionably the source of some of UCD's issues. I reflected on Monday the tape of this one to see were they, did they play less of their starters or something, but all the big names were there. Maybe 1 or 2 missing, but a lot of household names in the AFI were there. So yeah, really, really surprising to see such a low output on offense. But this team, what they're made of, and they'll have the mental fortitude to get back in the lab. This could be a good thing for them in the long run. They'll go back in and say, look, we were terrible. This was a really bad game for us. We need to improve so many aspects, and it kind of gives them something to drive them for the rest of the season. Like, if they had won this game and they went 5-0, and they're playing, the 3 more games left in the season against teams you're going to expect them to beat, it kind of runs the risk of becoming a bit humdrum and a bit routine, and you're not really getting up for it until the bowl game, and then you have to bring yourself up to a level. I think this will keep them focused and massively driven now until that bowl game, if they get there, but I expect they will.
Yeah, I think it keeps us a little bit more focused and driven as well, not to be just kind of phoning it in. I think it finally gives us a reason to create a narrative around the UCD games. I think sometimes it can be difficult, being the juggernaut that they've been over the last couple of seasons, to have some genuine conversation over the results of the game. And I think, as I echo Alex, I don't expect that necessarily to go exactly as planned the next time they face each other, but it at least gives us legitimate things to point at, and also I guess other teams on tape to point at and say, look, this is an unbeatable unit. There's ways that we can beat this team if we play the right football and if we play our game really well. And that's actually true, right? We don't have to just make it up just for talking points. We can actually point to something now. So I think that makes it a little bit more interesting, it gives it at least a feel of competitiveness. I really am enjoying seeing the Trojans play really well this season. I think we need that. There was a concern, I would say, around the league when the Rebels kind of underwent their off-season changes. I think people expected a little bit of a dip, and we were hoping that one of the chasing pack stepped up. And it's been the Trojans, and they haven't just stepped up a little bit. They haven't separated themselves out from the chasing pack. They've really closed the gap towards UCD. And I think that's what I'm most excited to see, that on a good day, the Trojans can win. And as I said, that gives us legitimate talking points to discuss and look forward to going forward, instead of trying to make up some stuff just to make it seem vaguely competitive. And I think that's important. It's maybe a little bit overlooked given how amateur the sport is, but ultimately we need competition. I'm sure that we're gonna talk later on a similar point, but competition is key. As we improve the facilities, as we improve the viewership, getting things like videos and broadcasts up and running, then you need the quality. Then it's an amateur sport, but the quality has to be there. And so having two genuine competitors is exciting for the league, and I think it at least gives us something to follow now for the rest of the season to keep our eye on.
Yeah. On the Trojan side of things as well, being 22-0 up at half time was probably not a scenario that both teams envisioned in their wildest dreams or nightmares. They totally dominated on the defensive side of the ball. They gave UCD nothing. I've never actually seen UCD have to punt so much in a game. They had an answer for everything in that first half. But the thing is, and look, the Trojans will probably be the first to tell me this when I ask the question, and they'll probably say no. But did they not throw everything, but they did throw a lot at UCD to make sure they got this win, to make the team believe that they can beat UCD again if it comes to a Shamrock Bowl, because I think maybe it was important for that team, like I said, to believe that they can beat them going, because you don't want to have another defeat against UCD this season on your back to go with the other defeats from previous years. If you do make it to a bowl against this team, that you don't want that feeling that these are not invincibles, but these are, the toughest team to beat in Ireland, and we haven't done it yet. And now this takes all that doubt out of it. It proves to them that, yes, we can beat them on any given day, just like we've done this past weekend. And they will probably believe now, if they do face them in a Shamrock Bowl, provided both teams make it, that they can do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I'd push back on is I don't think they've necessarily played their hand too early. As you said, I think the value for them to get this win is huge. I don't think they take anything for granted anytime you face UCD, 3-week break or not, that you're going to have to go and win. And I think they'll be excited because I'm sure there's stuff on tape that they can improve, that they can tell themselves this wasn't a perfect game. We can play better. And so that gives them the get up and go to keep improving. Also, I think in this league at the moment, if you can get your run game going, it's extremely difficult to stop that. And I think that's something they'll be able to really take from this game, is regardless of how it went, the fact that they could lean on that running game, and now UCD is going to have to show that they can stop that the next time they play. I think that's really important. And I think that's something they can lean on going forward in terms of any future games, whether have they to play them again this in the regular season, Darragh, or the next time. So going into the playoffs, probably, as we said, maybe the most the favorite ball matchup at the moment. So look, I think the Trojans should take everything they can from this game, and I wouldn't be too concerned about how it's going to play out later on. I think you got to rack up your wins, as you said, build that into your confidence, and just keep going. Then you've now got rid of the underdog mindset, as you said, and really ingrain it into the team and keep pushing.
Yeah, I agree there. I don't think that they were necessarily more, even like more uh, giving it more credence than UCD were. I think both teams took the game fairly seriously. The Trojans were just more up for it than UCD were, and they just came out, especially on defense. The lads on defense were flying around, really, really impressed by that unit, which we know is a good unit, but still to see it negate that like number one offense in the league is something different that we haven't seen before in previous years. I think they did run UCD close last year, but it was like a 16-14 or something like that slog that they sort
Yeah.
of lost on a last drive sort of a thing. So I think the team would have had the belief that they could beat UCD. Um, it probably is important to be able to put that down and like have proper evidence of that ahead of a bowl game. Um, so it is probably a more significant win for the Trojans than if it had been a win for UCD. But yeah, they're just really impressive outfit, this Trojan side. That run game is very good. The touchdown that Ray Sean scored where he ran one way and jump cut back the other way and accelerated into the end zone was like really elite level stuff. Very impressive to see.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this Trojans squad will have the belief that they can win if they do come up against them in Athlone. And I think the UCD side will also have a belief that they can play a lot better than they did, and on their day they can match and overcome the Trojans. So I think it probably was the perfect result for a neutral spectator, because if this does end up being the bowl match, I think we are going to see an absolute classic.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else to add to that before we move on from the game?
Oh.
Nope. Everyone happy? Excellent stuff. I love that. Moving on then to we'll talk about Sunday's game in the Premier Division. It was the Belfast Knights also coming down to Dublin and also leaving with the W. They beat the South Dublin Panthers 49 points to nil. Zach McDowell had 2 passing touchdowns on the day, one to Dottie McShane, one to Zach Templeton, who his first touchdown in AFI, so congratulations to him. Zach McDowell also had a rushing touchdown. Bruce Deary had 2 rushing touchdowns. Harry Salt and Phil Henson also contributed with a rushing touchdown each. Interceptions as well for Johnny Headley, Chris Moore, Aaron Black, and Turlock McGowan. And Cahert Harper also had a strip sack in that game as well. The Knights continue their strong season. They are now after this game, they are now 4-2. It's not officially clinched, but as good as at the moment that they are going to be going to the playoffs this year. It's been a really, really successful year. They've bounced back, or they've never actually let the injury to Liam Moore's affect them. They've continued on what they've done. Zach McDowell has done fantastically well in the quarterback position. And again, for that defense to play so well again and to keep a team under 10 points, this is a team, if they finish third or fourth, that neither of the top 2 are really going to want to face.
Yep, totally agreed. Interesting to see that they reverted back to Zach McDowell under centre. I haven't put Liam Moores in there for the Trojans game, but look, I guess it was a case of it was working great. Liam might not have been fully fit. We don't know the full reason behind it, but Zach is doing pretty well as signal caller this season for them. So yeah, it's a good decision to keep going with it. It just really it's 2 sides at the opposite ends of the spectrum there. The Knights are an up and coming young team, sort of pushing for playoffs to try and break the old duopoly of the 2 Dublin teams, the UCD and the Rebels. Now, obviously, looking to maybe make it the 2 Belfast teams if they could, if they do end up in that 3 seed. Can they knock off the Knights to move the capital? In the battle of the capitals, I suppose, up there. So yeah, look, they've been really impressive all year. Offensively, they've been good, and they appear to be getting better as well, which is a real positive. For them, they've nearly got that locked up. Not quite. Did they have the head-to-head over the Rebels? Have they played the Rebels yet, or did they
No,
play
they
them?
play the Rebels in a couple of weeks. They actually play the Rebels on the 7th of June.
Okay, yeah. So that's going to be a key one to sort of determine who is going to end up there in the playoffs. But I think at the moment you'd probably say the Knights do seem to be performing better. On the Panthers side of things, yeah, look, it's a hard day when you go out there and score no points and get nearly 50 put against you. I think as we said, they're kind of in opposite positions. The Knights and the Panthers, they're very much the Panthers on the down, haven't had a few up years, and yeah, I think they're going to be trying to keep going out there, avoid relegation, and see can you do some sort of rebuild and get yourself ready for next season. I think it needs to be the focus now. Get some snaps into young guys, and see who's going to be the future of the franchise there.
Yeah, I'd say that in fairness, the Panthers were probably had it pretty well marked on their calendar how big the game was a couple of weeks ago, and that would have been the big one for their season to make sure they avoid any relegation issues. I think the Knights will be very, very happy because obviously they will have expected a win here against the Panthers, given the way the season's going. It's one thing to expect it, it's another thing to go out and execute. I think to echo what Alex said, not just to score 50 points, which is good. And again, you look at it, you get a very strong run game. I think that bodes well for them. It highlights again how difficult it is when you get a defense that isn't prepared or can't stop the run on the day, how much damage you can do. But as we spoke about in the previous game, if you have a run game and teams are struggling to stop it, it really gives you a great platform to go and win the game. And especially when you've got a couple of quarterback options. And as you guys said, McDowell doing pretty well in his stand-in role at the moment. It really makes them diverse. And then shutting out the Panthers as well, that's hugely important for the defense. It doesn't matter where any of these teams are in the Premier Division. To get a shutout is hugely important. It's a lot of confidence for the offense or for the defense, beg your pardon. And when you mark these games on the calendar, they always have in the back of their mind that potential to be a banana skin. So it was really important to stamp that. As you guys both said, I think next week is a huge game, regardless of whether they're in the driving seat or not. I think it's similar to the Trojans the week just gone, where it makes a huge statement if you can win inside the camp and outside the camp. And even if the Rebels aren't where they were last year, they still have a huge presence in the AFI. And anytime you can notch a W against them, I think that's hugely important. So I think it'll be, for the Knights, it'll be straight on now to focus on this huge game, knowing as well, I believe the Rebels play in between. So we're going to have to see how they make it through that in terms of squad availability and injuries, obviously. So I think the Knights will be really high expectations, let's say, to finish out the season strong and make sure they make the playoffs. And as Alex said, it seems like the pendulum was swung back up north now in the last couple of weeks. So we'll see how this plays off in the playoffs. I think it's really exciting now that we have two genuine contenders that could, as you said, Darren, knock off any of the first two seeds.
Yeah. Fionn, it's been the first time we've actually had you on in almost months at this stage.
Yep.
As a former Panther, I'd love to get your sort of insight on how you are feeling and what your thoughts on the team now with the difficulties that they're going through, considering, the highs of last year, starting, I think, what was it, 6-0 or something like that, getting to the playoffs, running the Rebels close in the playoffs to the struggles that they've had this year to, get a squad together, get it's not just a squad, but almost a club in general to get them together. Still no head coach after the departure of Owen O'Sullivan. What's your thoughts on the team from the outside? Obviously, I know you want to be diplomatic because I'm sure there's still a lot of friends on that team as well that you obviously don't want to put down or anything like that. I'm not saying that you would, but just your thoughts in general on how the Panthers season has gone so far.
Yeah, I think from the start they've been very unlucky, and I think it's come from the renewed focus now in this cycle with the flag football being added to the Olympic calendar and the Panthers being such a prolific flag team on that side of the sport. it's impacted it in terms of taking a lot of athletes out of that squad. And while there's plenty of excellent athletes still on the squad, anytime you have a wholesale change, like both quarterbacks that played last year are gone, a couple of the wide receivers as well have focused on flag this year. That's a lot of offensive weaponry that gets removed, that even if you have the talent to replace, they weren't getting the starting reps last season. And so it takes a while to get that up and running. And it also creates just a little bit of instability, I think. And it's all just little things that are adding up that really they need to weather the storm a little bit. There's going to be ups and downs. I think it's been a little bit of a perfect storm moment in the sense of the lads leaving to focus on the flag. By that, then they've had to switch to a lot of youth, which I think in the long run will pay off for the club. But right now, you kind of have to take your medicine a little bit in the Premier Division. They really don't get a lot of time to bed in, and teams will take advantage of that. So I think we might hopefully be seeing something more akin to the Knights and maybe the Rebels, where if you can get through the little bit of pain to introduce the young lads, hopefully you have the squad for years to come. But the Panthers have never had a particularly big squad, so I think that has also impacted them. You know, it's difficult. You got to keep morale up. The win a couple of weeks ago will be, as I said, hugely important to prove that they can win, because that is questions. There'll be some guys there on the team that hadn't won a football game, that didn't play a whole lot of football last year when there was so much success. And so getting that win is hugely important. And then, of course, it's week to week, and it's very frustrating as a club, as a kind of a board. I'm sure everyone there, we've all been on boards of various clubs at one point or another, and we know that pain, and controlling that narrative is important to make sure that the guys that are here and committed feel that stability. I think they'll be really frustrated with the head coaching position. I think they're probably wise not to just get anybody, but at the same time, I'm sure they'll all say, look, it will certainly be a weight off somebody's shoulder somewhere down the club. Someone is shouldering a burden they probably don't need to have because of the absence of the head coach. So I imagine that would smooth things out. But I think at the moment they've got that win in their back pocket. They'll lick the wounds a little bit, keep recruiting, keep bringing up the young talent, because they had started to grow a youth football team in the last couple of seasons that they'll now obviously need to lean on. So I don't think it's all doom and gloom, but certainly back down to reality quite quickly with the kind of flying high last season. And it's unfortunate in the AFI, that's what can happen, especially with smaller clubs. So hopefully now I do think they can weather it, but it's not going to be easy. And continuing to field teams, I think, is hugely important, Dara. We know that from our time at the Pirates. Once that starts to become a little bit dodgy, I think that's
Alex knows from his time as well. Not just the Pirates.
Exactly. So I think that's the really big warning flag. Look, 15 to 20 guys with a lot of rookies, 49 nils are going to happen. It's when you've got 15 to 16 guys and you're bailing out in the fourth quarter, that's when it's really a worrying scenario. So I don't think we're there yet. I don't think they're there yet, and I think they'll be confident they can turn it around. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I think they've had a long existence in the top division, and they've been through low numbers before. I think they know what they need to do. It's just about getting the right pieces in the right places, and they'll turn it around. I think it'll be painful this season, but hopefully coming into next season they'll be more prepared, and they'll have a little bit of experience as well on the panel, which will help.
Okay, perfect. Next up for both teams, the Panthers are heading to UCD on the 15th of June. The Knights, like I mentioned, face the Rebels on the 7th of June. A huge game there for they could potentially knock the Rebels out of the playoffs while also securing their own playoff spot too, which is going to be a huge game up in Belfast in a few weeks' time. The other game in the Premier Division, the UL Vikings, they were at home against the Cork Admirals in a Munster derby, finished 33-0 to the Admirals. On the scoring side of things, Jay Kennedy had 2 passing touchdowns, one to Jan Decini and one to Declan May. Jake also had a rushing touchdown. Also on the rushing touchdowns was Marty Mulray and Declan May as well. Next up for both teams, I'll get to that in a minute, but yes, the Admirals, they continue now their fine run of form. They've now put together 3 wins in a row. They are now occupying that fourth and final playoff spot at 3-3. Most importantly, they have that head-to-head record over the Rebels from beating them a couple of weeks ago. The Admirals are doing exactly what they need to do, Alex, to make sure they get that fourth and final, or possibly still time to get that third spot in the playoffs.
Yeah, look, I think when we looked at the league tables a month ago and the Admirals were 0-3, we did say they probably weren't in a state of panic yet because their schedule was quite lopsided against them. So I think we're fairly vindicated there now with them sitting in that 4 seed at the moment with 3 wins on the bounce. And what we did talk about when they were going 0-3 was saying their offensive output wasn't quite there. The 33 points is certainly a good showing, and it's great to get guys in the end zone. Against this sort of more limited UL side, you might have expected them to put up a score more similar to what the Knights were doing against the Panthers. So I still think they sort of lack the offensive firepower to do anything in the playoffs if they do end up taking that 4th spot. There, I think it's an area of their game that's definitely had some struggles this year, and just it seems to have maybe not gone backwards, but it certainly hasn't developed from where they were at last year. But look, a win is a win. 33-0 is still a decent day out. And you just gotta. I think they've got another game against one of the teams at the bottom next. I think they're the Cowboys next. We're going to talk about that in a bit. So you just want to keep honing those offensive skills, developing those connections, and trying to be better so that you can see about maybe throwing an upset in there. You know, if 4 against the 1 seed, it is always tough in this league, but you know, they'll go out there with belief in themselves, I'm sure. Defensively, as we've always said, they're always solid. You're never going to get an easy game against the Admirals. So it's not a surprise to see the UL side, who haven't managed to score all season, score none against the Admirals, who are a very good defense. And that is quite worrying for UL, the lack of scoring. But they've just got to keep their own belief, because they've got a massive game coming up next as well that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, yes, we will, absolutely. Fionn, yeah, like that with UL, it's not great preparation for them right now for their biggest game of the year coming up here now. Basically, this will probably decide whether or not they're going to stay up in the division next week or this coming week, I should say, against the Cowboys. It's nothing, you know, it's not a slight to say that they lost, and they lost heavily to Cork, because obviously at this moment in time, these two teams are at different ends of their road. But it's the non-scoring that's the big issue. And I'm just having a look through here now at the moment. You know, I don't think they have scored a point yet this year.
Yeah,
it's hugely concerning against a Cowboys team that have their own struggles. I will say they have their own struggles when it comes to scoring too, but have found the end zone, you know, at least a couple of times. It just, like, for the biggest game, for the biggest fight that they're going to have all season, to have not scored a point all year in all their games, it's not great for the confidence.
No, it's not. It's quite demoralizing. And look, I think it plays in a little bit to what I was trying to say about the Panthers, as well as inherently with these university teams, especially UL, they do have quite a high turnover in terms of roster from year to year. So there'll be guys that are figuring this out for the first time that maybe don't have that confidence that a score will come. But I think if they're being honest, and to be honest, if you're a team like UL, the Cowboys, and unfortunately the Panthers as well this year, I think you need to be very honest with yourself, and you need to survive those games against the likes of the Admirals and the Knights, and you really have to highlight on your calendar the teams that are around you, and that will be this game coming up against the Cowboys. So I think in one way, sure, it's going to be disappointing. It's certainly tough on the confidence, I would imagine, even if you ignore the disappointment side of things, it'll be tough on the confidence. And hopefully, if the coaching needs to be strong there, I think to get in practice and make sure the guys believe that there is something we can do against these defenses that will score points. We just need to execute properly and have a bit of belief. I think if the team truly believes, the squad of players truly believes, I think they will have the ability to score against the Cowboys. I don't think that's in doubt. But you need to be very aware of how big this game is, and you need to make sure that all your players are up for it, because ultimately, regardless of what happens against the Admirals, you were never really expected to win that game. But as you said, Darry, you're going to need to win this upcoming game in order to stay in the Premier Division. So I think it's going to be hugely important.
Yeah. Next up for both teams, like you mentioned, UL's big game at home against the Cowboys on Sunday, which we'll preview now in a few minutes. The Admirals have a week break before they actually head up to Craigavon to take on the Cowboys on the 8th of June themselves. So a chance for the Admirals possibly to wrap up a playoff spot if they can win that game too. On to Division 1, and we'll go back to Saturday, and that's Saturday's games. That is the Loud Mavericks 50, the Causeway Giants 0. Ty Henry with 2 passing touchdowns on the day, one to Brendan Sims, the other to Finn O'Donovan. Grant Shute had 4 rushing touchdowns in that game. Ty contributed with a rushing touchdown of his own, and one Alex Sims had an interception in that game too. I tried to push for it to be play of the week. I was shot down by Alex himself, so it's going to be a different play this week. Yeah, Alex, the Loud go from strength to strength. They are now 5-0. It seems as though they are heading straight for a home playoff spot, or inverted commas home, as you mentioned at the start of the show. A really good win in really tough conditions as well on Saturday.
Yeah, it was raining cats and dogs. All right. Look, we're really happy with where we're at. Firing on all cylinders really at the moment, offensively and defensively. So we've played a lot of games in May. I think we've one more now this Saturday. That'll be our 4th one in May, and I kind of think, like, to talk about the previous point we talked about, the Trojans UCD game. I do think that fluidity and just the constant games can really help you maintain a rhythm. And certainly for squads that have the size of ours, where we're capable of taking a few injuries or guys missing on certain days and able to fill in with decent replacements. It does allow you to have a real fluidity of your team, and I think it's potentially the way this season should go more in the future. Have more less gaps in between games. I know obviously there is reasons for that with some college teams and stuff, but that's for the decision makers to make, not me. On the other side, the opposite end of the spectrum for squad size, the Giants did come down to Dundalk with only 16 lads. So shout out to them for every single one of them played to the final whistle, and played cleanly, no moaning or giving out of it. Squad sizes or anything. It was a good game, played in good spirit, and fair play to them for fighting on till the last whistle. So just wanted to give them a shout out as well. But yeah, we're really happy where we are. Good position to be in at this point in the season, and we're just looking to make small tweaks here and there to make ourselves better, so that if we do end up in the playoffs in a bowl game, we can take advantage, because we know what it's like losing these playoff games. We've had enough experience of that in the last 3 years to last us a lifetime. So we really want to make sure we get the job done this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, to be fair, I've got to push back on one point there, because it wouldn't be right if we didn't call it out. And there was a bit of moaning in that game on Saturday. There was a little bit. And I justified moaning as well by one Nathan Chapman, who unfortunately got on the wrong side of the officials and was ejected for correctly pointing out to the officials that a 2-point try shouldn't have stood. But he was told that he was wrong, which we then later saw that he was actually right. So I'm sorry. Unfortunate that Nathan had to be ejected for being right. But he was not happy. And at that point of the game.
Yeah, look, when an Englishman is right and he tries telling you he's right, you just, no matter how right he is, it always just sounds wrong. And I think that's worthy of an ejection, no matter what words were exchanged, you know.
I presume his problem was that the Mavericks had 12 players on the pitch for the 2-point conversion, was it?
No, it was the what was it, Alex? It was your swinging gate style 2-point try, but the wide receiver on the far side was on the line when he shouldn't have been. Is that what was that?
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, that's it. I think the center wasn't eligible to catch the ball, and he did end up catching the ball. So that's like he's not eligible to catch the ball if he's covered up by the outside receiver. So that was the reasoning for that. They had studied that on tape and knew exactly if the wide receiver was on the line, don't cover the guy, and so they did that. They saw he was on the line, and then it was passed straight to him because he was wide open because they weren't covering him. And then there was some choice words exchanged, understandably so. And unfortunately, they weren't to the liking of the ref.
Yeah, exactly.
He got his marching orders.
Yeah, but Fionn, your view, you sort of again haven't had the chance to speak to you about, you know, Ty and the Mavericks. You know, he's obviously brought in a new offense. He's brought in, you know, sort of new structure to the team, and at the moment, from the results, you can see that it's clearly working.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, again, it comes back, and that's the reason I highlighted at the top of the show. The run game is super strong. I think it always has been. And unfortunately for the rest of Division 1, if any of the teams in Division 1 didn't need an upgrade on offense, it was probably the Mavericks already. So it's probably adding a howitzer onto a tank already. But yeah, they've been doing really well. And a little bit like we said earlier, it's important to just get through these games nice and clean. Make sure you're putting stuff on tape for your own team to get better week on week. They probably expected to beat the Giants. The Giants probably knew what was coming, especially with 16 men. But it's important to make sure you spread the ball around, make sure you're focusing on different things and take advantage of the game when a game like that comes to you, and stay focused. And as Alex said, they've had a nice run of consistent games. That's really stood to them. And I think they've done everything they've needed to do to polish up whatever needed to be done, get ready for a playoff run. Because like Alex said, the regular season has been manageable for them in the last couple of seasons, and now the big step will be the playoffs. With, I think they're looking great. I think they'll be very happy in their camp, obviously, but I think that's where they're going to really see if any of these improvements on the offense have really paid off. And I expect them to. I think they're in really good shape to win the championship. I think the Minotaurs will be a tough game, obviously, having come straight from that top division, but I reckon that we're pretty nailed on now at this point for that being the ball final, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that,
Phil.
I always wonder. I always wonder why we don't have you on the show more. I can't figure it out there now. Next up for both teams, like you mentioned, the Mavs are facing the Crusaders this Sunday. The Giants have a week off before they are coming down to Dublin to take on the Rhinos on the 8th of June. The final game that we are going to look at from the weekend is the Westmeath Minotaurs 35, the Antrim Stags 0. We thought at the beginning of the day that possibly we were going to see the return of quarterback Joe Kinahan. He sort of alluded to it on his Instagram with the gear. I think he kitted up, but he didn't actually play. In fact, it was head coach Connor Brennan coming in playing quarterback on the day, throwing 2 passing touchdowns, one to Domas Viles, one to Jack Walsh. Rafa Montero and Niall Corcoran had a rushing touchdown each, and Viles had a fumble recovery touchdown to wrap up the scoring. There was some reports, I haven't been able to confirm them. Going off the tape that's on Quick Cuts as well, it kind of alludes to it, but it seems as though it was 35-0 at half time. The Stags had already come down with a limited roster. They had, I think, a few injuries during the game too. And I believe that the second half was kneeled out. Cannot confirm or deny that. So we won't talk anymore about that side of it. We'll just talk about the Minotaurs itself and the fact that they were able to come back missing quarterback Sean McCormick for this game and still being able to put up a very impressive first half score against the Stags, and to bounce back, especially after their defeat to the Mavericks a couple of weeks ago. Alex, I go to you first on this one. With that win now, the Minotaurs wrap up their playoff spot. I'm not sure. I think that's correct that they are. But the fact that they're able to bounce back so well at home to the Stags, who were coming off their first win themselves, who would have been high on confidence at the time, is a good sign for them heading into playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Like they, if it was just one half game, I suppose like 35 for them, 35 is pretty good, pretty impressive to do in the first half in itself. Interesting to see Connor Brennan in there, as you said, Sean Misson and Joe potentially available. We don't really know the full extent of how his recovery's going, but good to see him kitting up, and maybe he will be back for a playoff run, which would certainly make their run a bit more interesting. Be watching ourselves with keen eyes to see if we can spot him on the pitch at any point this year before the playoffs get running. But yeah, look, they don't really seem to have slowed down. We know they've got a great offense. Defensively, they're pretty good as well, pretty solid defending the pass, particularly with some good corners there. But yeah, I think it was probably a result we all expected. The Minotaurs get back on the right track. The Stags, after a sort of emotional and well fought first victory, probably were expecting them to come down to earth like this. Unfortunate that they had to sort of bow out of playing the rest of the second half, because we all know we all want to play all 8 of our games, but these things happen, injuries and whatnot. So yeah, look, just I suppose for them, they've probably exceeded expectations already at this point. Anything for them is a bonus. So yeah, you just want to see them keep going, keep fighting, and improving, and seeing what they can, what sort of foundation they can lay to build their second season on.
Fionn, your point of view on the game?
Yeah, look, disappointing for the Stags. I mentioned earlier, when that sort of thing starts to happen, you do get a little bit more nervous. I think, as Alex said, everyone wants to finish out all the games, so they certainly won't have taken that decision lightly if that is what's happened. I think the Minotaurs have done well. Anytime you lose the quarterback like Joe, I think it's difficult to make sure that you maintain a bit of momentum and somebody steps up, and they seem to have been able to do that well. The run game obviously has been something the Minotaurs has leaned on for a couple of seasons as well, so that's clearly still clicking. And I think they came in with high expectations. I think once again, the favorite has handled the game, if that makes sense, done what they needed to do, probably got some rust knocked off. And I think they'll be gearing themselves up now for a playoff run. I'm fairly certain of that. So it's just about a matter now of making sure they get the best seed possible and set themselves up for a good playoff run.
Mm-hmm. Next game for both teams are actually both on the 8th of June. The Minotaurs host the Vipers, while the Stags will welcome the Eagles to New Forge. So that's all the games wrapped up. Like I mentioned, 4 of these 5 games have been sort of blowouts this week. We've seen a lot of them this season, unfortunately. There seems to be definite tiers in both divisions. And I'd love to get your point of view, lads, on this, because, we have obviously the 2 divisions now. We got rid of Division 2. Are we looking at possibly, or should we be looking at possibly at a restructure next year, possibly giving back a new second Division 2, maybe cutting SBC down to 6 teams, getting a few teams out of SBC, making that Division 1, a bit more competitive too, get the more bottom teams in Division 2 together, give them more competitive games against each other, because for the future of teams, team morale. I think also for a big thing is, I think for the prospect of welcoming new teams in too, I don't think the current structure works well enough for that. But Alex, I'll start with you first on this one. Are you happy with the league structure as it is at the moment? Is there anything that you would change about
I mean, I'm not unhappy with it. Like I wouldn't say that I'm. I think it's terrible and it's stunting growth or anything like that. I do think there are some things that, like, there are certainly changes we could look at that I think could benefit the league as a whole in the future. I think if you look at a lot of the elite leagues in countries that would be sort of similar sizes to us, like the Scandinavian leagues, like the Norwegian league, I think the Danish league and the Dutch league, Austrian league, their top divisions all have, I think it's usually 4 to 6 teams in them. We are a bit of an anomaly size wise with 8 in our division. I think you can see like there is a real disparity between the top and the bottom of the SBC at the minute. If you just look at, your points difference of your top 3 teams are all in the plus 100 range, and the points difference of your bottom 3 teams are all minus 120 or more. Like, that is a huge disparity between the very top level and the bottom level of the league. So there are teams like, let's say for argument's sake, it ends as it ends at the minute, UL go down, and the Mavericks were to come up. The Cowboys then have a next season, the Panthers as well, where they've come off a really hard season. Is it going to be hard to retain guys, especially I think older guys and as well rookies who have just gone through a grueling 8 seasons, and they're looking at grueling 8 games in the previous season, and they're looking at doing it again for little victories, maybe again 1 win or 2 wins in a season max. Is there sort of merit in them sort of just taking a season down, dropping down into Division 1 for a season to kind of try and rebuild, pick up a couple of wins, get back kind of that love of football into it? I think that there could be merit in that. I mean, the Mavericks did that post COVID. We had a low squad number. We were really struggling. Guys were talking, especially older guys had kind of retired and weren't coming back. And then we dropped down to Division 2, start winning games, and those guys start coming back. Then our squad size slowly grew, and then obviously we've sort of grown exponentially this year with the addition of Ty and all his sort of recruiting wizardry that he does. But I think it can be a good thing to drop down. So it might be the sort of season to look at a restructure, but it's always a really difficult sell with the teams, especially to the SBC teams dropping out of that. Like, it's always a difficult sell. But I think we could benefit from the SBC being 5 or 6 teams, having a Division 1 that's, again, 5 or 6 teams, and a Division 2 then that's whatever would be left from it. Again, it could be a 5-team division there, and teams like the likes of, we've seen the Galway Warriors become active on social media again, talking about coming back up. It's a lot less daunting to have to go into a division where you've got 5 other teams there who are of a good standard, but are of a lower standard than, like, say, someone like the Mavericks or the Minotaurs at the minute. If they had to join into the bottom of Division 1 and they're playing the Rhinos, the Minotaurs, the Mavericks, the Crusaders, teams who have guys on there with 10, 15 years of experience playing the sport, it's going to be a lot more difficult to adjust to life there than it would be in a division with more younger teams like your Stags and your Giants. I think there's definitely a benefit to that, but I can understand teams having reservations about it at the same time.
Yeah, I think I echo that in terms of it'll be the splitting or the distribution, and I don't think it's ever going to be practical from a voting standpoint, although I guess we aren't really talking in in realities here, more kind of speculating on what we think could work. I think my concern might be an even split could create a kind of a lopsided bottom league. Actually, I'm not sure how many teams are actually in that same group. I'm looking at kind of the impact that it has when the Cowboys have been around in Division 1, and obviously the Minotaurs came down and had a really strong season this year. And so that, I guess, is my concern, is maybe the kind of the midfield, i.e. the top of the Division 1 and the bottom of the Premier Division, create this kind of backlog where there's maybe only 3 teams caught adrift at the bottom, and that might be difficult. We tried to do that, Dara, when they had that kind of development Division 2, and it had its merits for sure, but it was also difficult. I think if I was kind of swinging for the fences and I didn't mind being a bit controversial, I would point towards the minimum squad size, and I would point more towards the audit scenario and maybe tightening that up. I think we've seen teams that have been really successful and really strong and really competitive have been able to leverage big squad sizes. I think the Rhinos are reaping the benefit of that recently. I think, as Alex just said, when the Mavericks found a way to increase the squad size. Now, granted, he did say, and in fairness, it's true, they leveraged the kind of the structure to be able to create wins. But I think the reality is as well, if we are such a small island with such a small sporting population, I think we need to be careful about having too many teams spread too thinly in order for them to be able to support themselves, and ultimately teams coming in and out of existence or going on long beaten streaks, as Alex says, it does create wandering. It does create players leaving the sport. And so I wonder out loud, maybe if less teams but bigger teams are an advantage in terms of maybe you go 2 leagues of 6 teams. That, and it comes obviously with its caveats. That's not an obvious answer either, in the sense of there's geography to look after, and I'm not necessarily saying it's based around geography. I'm not saying, say, 1 Dublin team and 1 Belfast team or anything like that. But I think the Stags did a good job trying to amalgamate 2 teams together, but they've now started to struggle for teams again. But I'm looking around, I'm looking at the Trojans and UCP and the Rebels and the Mavericks and the Rhinos, and to a certain extent the Minotaurs as well, have been able to keep strong, consistent, legitimate numbers, not just to pass the audit, but genuinely showing up on game days. And that seems to be what jumps out to me, of really creates team stability. And then that breeds competitiveness. So I wonder, is there some middle ground there where we can kind of, and again, I don't suspect that would ever pass a vote, but I wonder out loud, is that maybe a viable option for what might actually bolster the league? It's probably going to be very unpopular and controversial, but I think it's something that stands out to me, that maybe squad sizes, you look at the pro leagues and stuff, they all have roster sizes, and maybe that can benefit. But of course, then you may end up with a lot of players that end up as training players and never see a whole lot of game time, which is a pity, because at the end of the day, this is just a hobby. So no perfect answers, no silver bullets, I don't think, but I think there's some things we should at least consider, and maybe our ideas give somebody a good idea that might be actually applicable, that can ultimately help grow the sport, and that's what we all want.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we say. We're looking just to see what we can do best to limit any sort of damage, because when I'm going through the scores each week and you're doing results and everything, and you're seeing, something to 0, or, something to 8, 40 or 47-7. It's I can't, although yes, for the team that are winning and showing that they have their ducks in a row and everything, it's great. I look at the other team and how demoralizing it is, and how there's a risk that, like, guys are not playing, or not enjoying playing the game, and that's how you're going to keep them. But I also look at it on the other side, where just shaping the league all the time is not going to fix it. There has to be a decent level of coaching brought into teams, and if the coaching is not great, it doesn't matter about who has many players and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to work. So yes, it's about it's a little bit like league. We can have a look at that, but also, yeah, a big thing is we need to start improving the coaching side of things too. And I know there's a coaching clinic in August for people who want to become coaches in the league and stuff, which is great. I'd like to see more done on that. I'd like to see coaches come in and like special guest coaches and come in a bit more often and stuff.
I have to say, Dara, I saw you. We were at obviously the Steelers kind of launch around the Dublin game and stuff, and I have to say I was a little bit disappointed to hear their high focus on the flag side of things, and there was kind of an answer given where like, well, there'll be a trickle down effect, and as you said, I think there's so many ways that they could improve the game for limited investment on their end, like that kind of coaching clinic. And I think that's an excellent way, right? Because you don't want to send lads in and get 150 lads where a coach comes over and does the player drills. Much better, I think, if one coach can make 10 coaches better, and then that trickles out to kind of 150 players in their own training sessions. I think that's one way. So I was a little bit disappointed when he said that, I have to be honest. But look, hopefully we can leverage, AFI can leverage a couple of more teams after coming into the market that will maybe step up and create a little bit of competition in terms of how they interact with both the fans, but also the players, because I think we need to do a better job of aligning that and saying, look, you have fans in Ireland, but you also have a chance to grow the sport in Ireland, and that will breed fans naturally. So
yeah, but again, like it's not entirely on the Steelers, because they're coming in just to play their game, and if they want to focus on flag, that's their prerogative. That's what they want to do. It still should be a conscious effort led by, like, I don't know who's in charge of coaching and the head of coaching in the league, and maybe they want to do more. They're not getting the support. So I don't know. It's look, I'm not covering that again. We've covered it numerous times previous seasons on this show, where we're not getting any communication at all from anything, and when it comes to stuff like that. But if we can get coaching improved, a lot of it, when coaches come over, it's off the teams making that effort. Like the Trojans bringing in, I think, who's his name from? He's over in ELF with Paris at the moment. Is it?
It was that? Yeah.
Johnson.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think you're right with Johnson. Yeah.
But has come over, and has been with them, and they've worked it around where that he is there during the off season for the ELF, so that it's not interrupting with his actual paying job, and he's coming over, and the Trojans are reaping rewards of this. Absolutely, they are. So it's tough. It's just, I just like to see a bit more of it. We're way over an hour at the moment, so we're going to keep these previews fairly light, because I'm just aware of the time, and obviously we all have things to do this evening with what's left of our evening. 2 games in the Premier Division, 2 games in Division 1. Sorry, Alex, before I move on, do you have anything else to add on the league side and the coaches side of things before?
No, I'm all good.
You're all good. Excellent. Let's start in the Premier Division, and on Saturday it is the return fixture of the opening game of the season. UCD travel to De La Salle to take on the Rebels. UCD 4-1, the Rebels 2-3. The Rebels coming off their loss to Cork. The UCD coming off their loss to the Trojans. Lads, who are we looking at in this one? I should also mention, if UCD win this game, they will officially clinch playoffs as well. So, Fionn, I know you're conscious of time, so I'll go with you first on this one.
Yeah, I reckon pretty straightforward bounce back game for UCD. I think that the Rebels will make it interesting, but I do expect UCD to be able to pull out a win in this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotta agree with Fionn there. Like, who better to have a bounce back game against than your old rivals for the last few seasons? I think the UCD boys will be up for it. I do think it'll be a closer game than the opener, which I think was 40-0 to UCD. So I think at the same time as like it's going to be a bounce back game, I think that the Rebels will also see a little crack in the door and think, if we upset these boys here, we can get into the playoffs, and they'll want it as well, as much as UCD will want to bounce back and give it to the Rebels. The Rebels will also be seeing it as an opportunity there. So I think that is poised to be a good game, and quite a good game. I think it'll be relatively close, probably I'm going to say UCD by 2 scores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Rebels are fighting for their lives at the moment to make sure they get that playoff. They don't have the head-to-head against Cork. The only chance they have to get a head-to-head ahead of someone is by beating the Knights, but they are already a couple of games back on the Knights at this stage too, so you're still relying on them to lose games in that sense. So, they're really kind of behind the 8 ball, can't let any slip-ups, and, but you're coming against a wounded beast in UCD. They're going to want to put right what went wrong last week, and I think that's what they'll do. It's not going to be, I think, what was it, 36-0 week 1.
It was 40, was it? No.
Was it 40-0? Was it 40-0?
Exactly.
Yes,
40,
40-0.
wasn't it?
Yeah. I don't think it'll be that, but I do think that it will be, like you mentioned, a couple of scores win for UCD in this one. Probably, normally when you see Rebels versus UCD, you think that's the biggest game in the division that week, but I would argue probably this next game is the biggest one in the Premier Division. It's the Vikings 0-4-1 hosting the Cowboys 1-4 to almost certainly decide which team is going to finish bottom this year and be relegated back to Division 1. Like we mentioned, the Vikings are yet to score this year. The Cowboys, one of their only scores this year was the go-ahead touchdown they scored from Owen Hughes to win this fixture early on in the season. It literally, it's do or die for both teams here, and with that drawn game that the Vikings have, they don't need to rely on beating the Cowboys by more than 10 points. All they have to do is win. They can win by 1 point, and that's their job done. But who do you think is going to come out in this game? I'll go with you first, Alex.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I think not going to predict a massive scoring game, but I think I gotta think that the Cowboys are going to win this one. They've put up some scores. They've got into the end zone a couple of times on this season, whereas the Vikings just haven't. I gotta think the experience of having scored on a season is going to just lean the game their way.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that one. I think a very similar scenario. I think the Cowboys have at least shown so far this season they've got something up their sleeve. I do think the UL have it in them, but you got to see it first. So I'm going to stick with the Cowboys as well on this one.
Yeah, it's tough for the guys because they actually have had a few injuries this past few weeks, the Cowboys, and yeah, it's tough. Like I looked at some of the tape from the Vikings game against Cork, and you want them to do well, but I'm struggling to see the offensive scheme and it working. It could, like this, would probably be a 1-score game. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a draw as well, which will do the Cowboys absolutely. They'll take that all day at this stage. Yeah, it's tough. Although I have to go with the team that has actually put the ball in the end zone this season, and that's the Cowboys. I can't back UL, unfortunately, what I've seen to date. I hope they can come out in this game and put in a really, really good performance because it's their season, literally, on this game. So, so much pressure on it for them. So unfortunately, I'm gonna go with a Cowboys win on that. In Division 1 on Saturday, the Wexford Eagles are back in action again following their defeat to the Rhinos a couple of weeks back. They welcomed the Vipers to Gorey Town Park. The Vipers coming off their own loss to the Stags just a few weeks back too. Fionn, I'll go with you first on this one. The Vipers have shown that they have been able to win a few tough games when needed, but it's a tough ask going all the way down to Gorey on Saturday and getting a result against, despite the numbers, still a quite resilient Eagles team.
Yeah, I have to say I'm a bit in the dark in this one. I haven't been able to keep up too closely with Division One, to be honest. So I'm going to take the Eagles based on historical experience of them in a tough outfit, an offense that's difficult to stop, and then also playing at home after such a long travel game for the Vipers. I think I'll take the Eagles in this one.
Yeah, interesting game here for that sort of fourth seed playoffs. The side that wins this game, I think, is the one that will be looking to pip the Crusaders to that fourth seed. I think it comes down to whether or not the Vipers have their dynamic South African running back duo or not, because that really is a big thing for them. I don't think they had it against the Stags, and they lost that game. If they have those guys playing for them, I think that they can beat the Eagles. But other than that, if they don't have those guys, I think they probably don't have too much of a hope. But I would say that the Eagles will probably win in that case. So that's my thinking.
Yeah, I'd sort of be around the same mindset. If the two lads are there, I give the Vipers a big chance. They are still, like I said, fighting for playoffs, but they can't let any slip ups considering they have that final game against the Crusaders. In if they can keep the winning going, a winner take it all game. But yeah, the Eagles are still technically in it as well. You know, they have only played 4 games this year.
Yeah, four. Yeah,
4 games so far this year.
Our game
Considering
against them in Wexford Cup. Yeah.
We still don't know what officially is going to happen in that game. You know, if it is going to be replayed, if it's going to be a draw, we still don't know yet. But I'm going to go with after seeing them first hand, I've seen both teams as well. You know, I kind of like a little more what the Eagles have on offense. I feel like was it Doran Trainer and Terry Kerry are good quarterback running back duo. Luke Fitzpatrick's obviously a threat on the outside as well. And yeah, just hopefully whatever injured bodies they had, they've recovered in the last few weeks, and you know they have some good guys on defense too that can hit hard, especially up front, which they're going to need to do against a tough Vipers line too. But I think the Eagles with the home advantage, I think they're just going to shade at that day, and to keep their playoff hopes alive at least for another week. Should also mention, in that game we'll go to this one first. The Mavericks at home to the Crusaders. Mavericks 5-0. Crusaders 3-3. Crusaders coming off their win up in Causeway against the Giants. Mavericks obviously coming off with their big win against the Giants as well. 2, Fionn, I'll give you the floor on this one here. Mavericks and Crusaders. Who have you got?
Yeah, I think this is a pretty straightforward one for me. I'm going to take the Mavericks. I think they're another opportunity for them to kind of work on a team. I think a little bit of a step up based on what they had last week, but I think they'll have a lot of confidence. And if anything, this will feed into kind of building up that playoff form, another team that's on the edge of the playoff bubble. And then also you have the added benefit of with a Crusaders loss, it really opens up that kind of 3 teams, Eagles, Crusaders and Vipers, in terms of where that bubble's going to go. I'd like to see an exciting finish towards the end of the season. So for me, it's pretty straightforward. I think I'm going to take the Mavs to win this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to go for a Mavs win as well. Sorry, Alex, you're going to say something.
Yeah, no, we're confident enough going into it. But if you can, for a moment, let me paint a scenario. We can clinch the playoffs with a win, but alternatively, if the Crusaders beat us by 51 points this Sunday, we lose out the rest of our games, and the Vipers and Crusaders continue to win along with the Rhinos and Minotaurs. That last game of the season, if the Vipers can replicate that 51-point win that the Crusaders put on the Mavericks and also beat the Crusaders 51-0, then that is the scenario that would see us not be in the playoffs.
So really, it's all to play for, is what you're saying, Alex.
All to play for, because it
on a razor's edge.
goes to points difference in head-to-head games played. We'd all be, us, the Crusaders and the Vipers would all be 1-1, and we beat the Vipers by 50 points. So if the Crusaders and the Vipers can both win respective games in that by 51, then we should be set up for the greatest upset of all time. So
it will be
happen.
it will be interesting to see what that Crusaders offense against your defense. I'm sure you're going to have a fun day with Wello on Saturday, and with Jordan too. Jordan's ability to run out of pocket shouldn't be looked past either. So it's going to be an interesting game, but I still think just look, the proof is there with the Mavericks, scoring 40, 50, in a certain cases, 60 points a game. It's really hard. And for a Crusaders team whose defense at times has leaked points, I find it difficult unless you get the holiest of holy rainstorms or something to cause this game to be an absolute mud bowl. And Alex passes up a clear
another
interception, and then he fumbles the ball, and it's
don't say Alex passes, Dara. Bad things happen when Alex passes.
Something's gone wrong if Alex
the
is
amount
passing,
of players we have now, I think I'm QB 13 on the depth chart or something like that. So I think we'll hopefully safe enough from that happening.
Hey, top 20 pick. Your top 20 pick. But yeah, so I'm gonna go with a Mavericks victory on that one for sure. That is all of it. Like I mentioned, if the Mavericks win that game, they clinch the playoffs. The Rhinos will clinch playoffs with a Crusaders loss and either an Eagles or Vipers loss in that game. So if the Eagles and Vipers game was a draw, we still have to wait until another week until we play to secure ourselves. So it will be still back in our hands. That's it, lads. Thank you very much. We ran a little over this evening. Very sorry if you have better things to do. We still appreciate you for tuning in this long. Before we go, we should mention that this show and every show this season is brought to you by Rain Rocks Web Design. They're the guys behind UCP.ie. Please go there for the latest league tables, scores, results. While you're at it, make sure you head over to the Instagram page at UnderCenterPod. That is all the stats, fixtures, results, everything you need for that too. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're really trying our best to grow the show as much as we can to make sure we can get the great AFI content out there to the masses and improve the league. We'll do our bit to help the league in that sense. But until next time, stay safe and we'll see you soon.